We're going to talk about creating EdTech plans for your staff today, so you guys are in the right place. I want to go over a couple of things today. One, student learning expectations. One of the things that often gets left out of PD plans are, what is actually the end goal? What should the students be getting out of it? A little bit about the different training models that we use and we find to be helpful. Some things around certifications, benchmarks, and then how do you assess, is your program working? And then actually looking at developing a plan. As Ryan said, definitely welcome people to turn on the video, discuss. Please use the chat. Ryan will be monitoring that, and then we're always happy to do individual discussions with people as well. As Ryan said, I'm the COO here at Beehively and Techabee. Beehively and Techabee are actually, two sister services. Beehively is our software website side that we do for schools, and Techabee is the IT EdTech support that we do for schools. I'm a former teacher myself. I spent 6 years working in a K-8 private setting, teaching science and math primarily to middle school 5th through 8th grade students. I'm also the mom of 3 kids, 2 who are school age now, so it's really interesting to be able to have that perspective of a parent watching students go through it and being a former teacher. One of the reasons why I left teaching and joined Beehively was that I was really passionate about EdTech. I found that I enjoyed teaching my fellow teachers about the EdTech possibilities more than I enjoyed teaching my students and dealing with their parents sometimes too. So I found that this was a really great way for me to stay in education, but also really be able to focus on the EdTech side of things. All right, so going through those 4 steps that I talked about for a solid plan. First, just a disclaimer, this is not a one size fits all. One of the things that I can't stand is when people, say like, oh, here's the template for exactly how to do this. Every school is unique. Every community is unique. The group of teachers that you have can be really unique. You might have 10 schools in a district that all have the same student learning expectations, but you've got one school with a bunch of teachers who love technology, another school that are like, why are you ruining my life with technology? So more than a lot of things, professional development plans can't be one size fits all and be successful. So we're going to talk about a lot of sort of options and approaches that could fit in some of your communities better than others, but definitely not a one size fits all, one answer for everybody kind of solution. As I said, making sure that you keep the students at the center of it is really important. It's hard when people say like, I want teachers to be able to do X, Y, and Z, but it's not tied back to student learning. So it's important to always start there. What are the goals that you have for students? We find that schools can be sort of all over the map when it comes to what are the student learning expectations around technology. The ISTE standards tend to be standards that I hear a lot of schools across the country sort of talking about and striving for, depending on how far your schools are with their technology. And obviously COVID sort of forced everyone to kind of push people along quicker. I have a 4-year-old in TK and like he can open his Chromebook and log in by himself. And a couple of years ago, like there's no way that we would have been teaching 4-year-olds how to do that. So schools have been sort of forced to move ahead a little bit. But if you really start to dive into those ISTE standards, by 2nd grade, students should be typing fully. And after 2nd grade, it's, doing a lot more integrated stuff. So not all schools are ready for standards that are that sort of demanding. So really looking at, what are your school standards? What are those district standards? And then start with some basic goals. Basic is okay. We don't have to have a list of 50 standards for each of these kids, especially as we're really scaffolding and building these plans. So it's okay to start basic. It's okay to think about, what are login practices? What's the digital citizenship that's being integrated? That's a piece that's often missed for students and teachers feel really uneducated about. But at the same time, I see kids that are, taking their password and email and like slapping it on the wall or slapping it on their desk. And that's a pretty poor practice for us to be sort of implementing for them. Now, granted, their teacher might have their password on their laptop also, and that's where they're sort of like learning that practice from. But as we know, not a safe way to do things. So definitely thinking about kind of what are those goals for students is going to be really important. I've mentioned scaffolding a little bit. Scaffolding, I think, is incredibly important when it comes to EdTech plans. So if you start too big with a lot of things, it's going to fall on its face. It's not like rolling out, a new math curriculum. It's something that you're going to want to start a little bit smaller. Be realistic. Lots of collaboration. We find that sometimes schools will allow teachers to collaborate in picking out a new social studies curriculum. They get to see different sales pitches, they get to look at different books, they get to decide together. Maybe the younger grades make a different decision than the older grades, but that same experience doesn't always happen with technology because there's not textbooks or things like that. So make sure you're still creating that space where people can really collaborate together. What do we want these to look like? How do we want our program to flow? And then really stress that cross-curricular collaboration. So instead of just, what are our tech standards, it's, okay, what piece of technology is going to be integrated into history this year? How are we going to elevate our math curriculum? What virtual field trips can we go on related to a novel that we read? So really promote that cross-curricular collaboration. So this is not a training just about students, but I wanted to touch on that. So I want to talk a little bit about kind of the training models that we find. And with EdTech especially, we have found that those huge large group trainings aren't always the best approach, although they tend to be maybe the most practical sometimes, or the ones that you can fit in to a time frame. So we want to look at some other options that we found to be really successful. A mix and match seems to be critical to anything that we've done. So making sure that there's opportunities for individual growth, individual questions, individual trainings, small group, large group, asynchronous, we'll talk a little bit about that, as well as collaboration, working in groups, whether those are the first grade teachers together, the high school math teachers together, or groups that are based a little bit more on comfort level. Have you used Google Forms in the classroom before? You never have? All right, let's put you all together and start with the basics. Okay, so individual. Working and learning in a teacher's space, we found, can be really helpful for success with technology. So if you take a teacher out of their classroom, put them in some auditorium, and you teach them about some really cool stuff they could do with a smart board, or some really cool stuff that their students could do with Chromebooks, it can be often hard for those teachers to translate that back into the classroom. So if you're doing a training that involves student Chromebooks, or an application they could use on a Chromebook, the teacher should have a Chromebook of one of their students in their hands. If they can be in their classroom and simulate that on their whiteboard with their computer, we find that they're at least 50% more successful. And again, that the red bullet point at the bottom, I know it takes more time and I know it can take more expense, but oftentimes it can just translate to a quicker success in the classroom. We also find that teachers are much more comfortable to ask questions. I know it can be helpful to hear other people's questions and be able to benefit from those, but at the same time, there's a lot of teachers, especially with technology, that if they don't understand step one, they're nervous to raise their hand and ask, and then you've already moved on and you've totally lost them. Sometimes you've lost the people around them because they're trying to help and then they miss step 3, 4, and 5. It's just like we see with kids in the classroom, right? If they don't understand the foundation of math and then you're trying to teach division, they're like totally lost. So we find that happens very quickly with teachers in technology for a variety of reasons. Teachers can just be really scared, nervous. So working one-on-one can really help, not necessarily everybody, but when you think about your school community, you can probably identify pretty quickly some people that would benefit from that one-on-one support. When one-on-one is not possible, or you're looking for more collaboration, we found that small groups can be really helpful. Small groups definitely being like 3 to 5, maybe 7 to 8 at the most. And for us, the most successful way we've done this is really by comfort level, doing surveys, assessing the teachers beforehand. Are you ready for Google Classroom for ninjas because you know everything about Google Classroom, or have you never used it before, or did you use it last year during COVID, the minimal amount that you had to, but you didn't really fully understand it? So really starting to look at where people's comfort level, assessing beforehand, asking them to sort of self-identify can be helpful versus like, I know you're not very good, so I'm going to put you in this group. It's not necessarily assigning them a high-low group, but letting them really identify, okay, this is how comfortable I feel. Sometimes we see teachers say like, I think I know Google Classroom, but I actually want to do the basics. I want to feel better about it. I want to build my foundational skills. So really letting them identify through pre-surveys, where's their comfort level. Subject level can be really helpful too. And this is when you get to start to mix those comfort levels. We find middle and high school subject levels can be really beneficial because you start to be able to share and collaborate, right? You have that one history teacher that's super into technology, integrating all these virtual experiences, and another teacher can maybe piggyback on that. Not 10 of their ideas, but maybe one, try one thing. Grade level can be helpful too, depending on the size of your school or if you're meeting district wide. But we often find that if a school only has 3 second grades and you've just got 3 teachers together, when it comes to technology, that doesn't guarantee you're going to have anyone in that 3 that feels comfortable. So those small grade level groups don't often work as well. Just like with individual, as I'm sure you know, it can be more expensive to do this way. You need more people, you need more facilitating that happens. But we find on those big sort of professional development days, if you can be rotating through different things, if they're also evaluating a math curriculum, some people can be at that, some people could be at technology. So if you can start to integrate it with kind of those small group rotating PD days, this model becomes a little bit more possible. Those large group trainings, generally we try to avoid them. We just feel like people get lost in the mix. They don't get much out of them, and it's hard to make it really relevant to them. The 2 times that we do find them really successful is to open the year with them, set expectations. What is your professional development for EdTech going to look like this year? What are the goals that we have for you? Do that as a big group. Everybody gets the same messaging. Everybody's on the same page. And then end of the year large group can be really successful as well. It's a chance to debrief. We also like it to be a chance to celebrate and a chance to share out. So really acknowledge like what went really well this year. What do we want next year to look like? Again, it's that idea of collaboration, and it's not like social studies where maybe you evaluate a new curriculum every 6 to 10 years. This is something you want to really debrief and evaluate every year and give people the chance to really start to feel that success happening. But in terms of like, hey, everybody, we're going to introduce Quizlet to you, definitely the least effective method to do that. We also encourage people to think really creatively. By nature, teachers obviously have to do certain amounts of credits or PD hours. So some teachers will seek these things out on their own, but there are just tons of free webinars out there, free self-paced courses. Conferences obviously aren't free, but those they can be asynchronous or synchronous options that teachers can go out and seek on their own can be really helpful. We find with the schools that we work with, we try to push out those resources once or twice a month, just as footers to other emails that we're doing. So if we have an email going out about, an important iOS update that they need to know about in their classroom, we just try to end it with like, oh, and just so you know, Google's doing this really cool Google for Doodle contest, like find out more about it here. Or there's a really neat webinar coming out from JAMP, which is something you guys use about Apple School Manager. Here's the link to that. So we just try to embed it as much as we can in any sort of email or communication, these opportunities that are out there. And we find that teachers do seek them out and appreciate sort of those being pushed to them as well. There's also always the idea of a partner, which is the role that we play at some schools, to really help not only guide the plan, but then implement and work one-on-one with teachers. Any questions so far, Frank? I know I've been kind of buzzing through this stuff.
No, not at all. It sounds actually really great and kind of makes me feel good with what I'm got set up here a little bit.
Awesome. Yeah, some validation. Perfect.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, I'll keep going then. Stop me at any time.
Okay.
So obviously, when teachers are teaching, we expect them to assess the students. Some schools require surveys of students or parents, depending on the age of the kids. So we got to do the same with our EdTech program, and we've got to be doing it regularly. And what's nice is there's a lot of tools out there that people don't have to reinvent the wheel. So a couple of sort of stages of the assessment. First, we want to just do a general assessment. I've kind of talked about this through some of the other slides. We want to assess the concerns of the teachers. We find the more often that you ask teachers, hey, we got a new laptop coming, schedule your time to transfer your data. What are you worried about? I want to know what you're concerned about before you walk in the room. So assessing before, giving them a chance to say, yeah, I'm a little nervous about this, or giving them one of those fun scales that is like, I'm so excited, no concerns, super excited, very nervous, wish I could be excited, but like, just can't be. Whatever it is, those kind of fun feedbacks that you can give them. Gauge their excitement. When new devices are involved, typically the excitement level goes up. When new apps are involved, we find the excitement level doesn't always go up as much. It's not flashy, it's not new, it's more like another website I have to learn, another login I need to do. So really kind of hyping up how it's going to help them meet those student learning expectations will often help get their excitement. Or yeah, you won't need to go make these copies or cut these papers out or grade papers like this. This is how it'll help you. Gauge people's ability to sort of take on new ideas. Obviously, during distance learning, like so many new things were thrown at teachers, whether they wanted it or not, making sure, especially over these next 18 months, really gauging how much new things can they take on? The new things that we threw at them, are they applicable now that we're not doing distance learning? A lot of them can still be really beneficial in the classroom. And then, like I said, just like you're assessing those concerns, really try to pull out those fears. We find that for a variety of different reasons, just around people's personal level with technology and how long it's been a part of their sort of professional life or even personal life, especially for some of our older teachers who have spent 20 years educating children incredibly without technology, that they just can be very fearful. And so really addressing those head on, those are kind of our prime candidates for that individual one-on-one support. Then start to really assess specific. So this definitely comes back to goal setting. What are the goals for the school? What are the goals by grade level or by subject? Be really cautious about pushing out apps that we say everybody at the school has to use. There's not a lot of apps out there that are great for first graders, fourth graders, and sixth graders. So really start to be talking with the teachers. The other thing that's really great about the app level is most of these apps these days have certifications that teachers can earn. And that's actually one of the best ways to really make sure that teachers are going through the steps and actually really understanding, and you can really confirm as an assessment. So if your first grade teachers if your fourth grade teachers are using Nearpod, go have them get their Nearpod certification. Build in that time for them to be able to do that. Because not only does it give them a bunch of training, most of it asynchronously, it confirms for you they did it, but it also is a badge of pride for those teachers. Like, okay, Nearpod says I'm ready to go. I feel ready to go. We highly recommend any schools using Google. Teachers should really, it should highly be recommended that a goal would be teachers become at least a level 1 certified educator. Level 2 is a little bit more, but at least the level 1 certification. And if you're an Apple-based school, doing the Apple teacher certification. And even the Apple teacher certification can be pretty advanced for some people, but you can get through it. And it's still, again, it's just one of those confidence builders and a way for the school also be able to say, like, all of our teachers are Apple certified. We use our iPads in the classroom and kind of go from there. I've talked a lot about goal setting. It's definitely for us, the most important foundation piece to really get these teachers bought in. Some people set a goal and get excited about it. Other people are like, well, I better meet that goal because my job's on the line. Building it into evaluations can be really important. But one of the things that's so neat about EdTech is when you set those goals, I want my students to have a technology option for their fourth grade mission project. Instead of just, the traditional poster or build the model that I've done, I'm going to give a third option. What's amazing about that is that the teacher, if they do that successfully, for example, I had a teacher a couple years ago who had a student who typically was very unengaged in class actually use Minecraft to build their entire mission, which is a great way to engage students, but it's also a great way for the teacher to be able to highlight, like, look, my goal was successful. And you actually have some great work and material to share out, to celebrate. So technology goals can be really neat in terms of what they do. So those goals should be annual. Hello. The goals should be specific and make sure that you build them into evaluations if that's possible. And then again, that end of year, really celebrate, share these goals out, give teachers the opportunity to present and spark ideas in each other. I talked a little bit about certifications already. Like I said, the Apple and the Google ones are really important if you're one of those schools. The other one that I wanted to highlight real quickly is the Common Sense Educator. Common Sense Media has actually come out with a they've revamped their certification a little bit, and it does a really good job of walking teachers through it. One thing that we find is teachers are just incredibly uncomfortable in knowing how to talk about digital citizenship in the classroom. I don't know how much you've used Common Sense Media, but it does a great job of just, free, the lesson plans are there, the connection to standards are there. And so getting that certification can be really helpful and empowering for teachers. All right, and then now that we have kind of
Emily,
all these, oh,
can I stop you right there real
yeah,
quick?
absolutely.
Because I have a question about common sense media and digital citizenship for teachers. That is one of the things on my plate right now that I want to get started in our district,
Mhm.
because for the past few years, we've been using common sense media with students, and
Okay.
we've been doing Hour of Code.
Mhm.
One thing that I have noticed in the past that we've left out is digital citizenship for teachers.
Mhm.
We need our teachers to know how to be good digital citizens
Yes.
in order to be able to teach that to our students. I
Mhm.
also want to include in that PD FERPA
Yep.
and all of the other things. Can you help
COPA.
me? Yeah, can
Yeah.
you help me lead down?
Yes. And actually, and I know Ryan's taking notes because I have a couple of different sort of like documents and things that we can share with you and talk more about that. It's interesting too, because not only do teachers need that education, but parents
Mhm.
really do as well.
Yes.
And obviously they're a harder audience to reach. You can push a lot out to them and it's hard to know what they're getting. But at the same time, we found too, having some set resources for parents of kids who are getting in trouble because they've done something inappropriate on a social media site or things
Mhm.
like that, to be able to help the parents sort of navigate through those situations. It still surprises me with a lot of the schools we work with will help administrators sometimes who don't even feel like they know the social media platforms to kind of be like, okay, help me
Uh-huh.
understand, like, what did the student do, or what app, or what does this mean? And the number of parents who still say like, oh no, my child doesn't have any social media. And it's like, you gotta be kidding me. Have you ever picked up their phone? Like, oh, is that what those apps mean? And it's so interesting. Like, they're on social media themselves, but they can just be so blind to what their kids are doing, or feel like it's an
Yep.
invasion of privacy to pick up my 11-year-old's cell phone. But actually your 11-year-olds get themselves in a lot of trouble on that cell phone if it's not properly set up. Um,
Yep.
we also find pushing out information to parents around just like smart practices with Wi-Fi at home. And a lot of the big, Xfinity, AT&T, some of the other service providers out there too, have some like great apps and free tools that parents can use to really kind of like lock things down. Plus there's just like other third-party services that they can buy. So yeah, in
Mhm.
addition to students, definitely teachers and parents. And I have some things that I can certainly send over to you. It is funny, we will find like, we'll get a request from a school like, oh, we need to change the staff, Wi-Fi password. A teacher had it up on her board or something, and now all the kids have it and they have access to like an unfiltered network. And you change it and then you push education out to the teachers. And then like a week later, another teacher does the same thing. And you're just like, oh, and they're like, but I had it on a Post-it note, like, really? But on your desk. And you called the kid over to your desk and they're in 7th grade and they can remember 8 characters. So
Right.
yeah, absolutely. It is interesting. It's a common theme that we see across the country, that digital citizenship is just a piece that gets sort of easily pushed aside or forgotten. And it's important for everyone.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, awesome. I will definitely follow up with that.
Thanks.
All right, so creating the plan. So this is kind of wrapping together all the different things I've talked about. Start simple, big advocate for surveys. Like I said, survey, survey, survey. If you don't have goals for this year, we'd recommend that you set some goals for this year for students and for staff. It's a good place to maybe insert that digital citizenship sort of need for staff. And when we talk about starting simple, even being more specific, Common Sense Media breaks out their digital citizenship into 8 different categories. So maybe you pick one this year, or maybe you pick 2 that you start with and really focus on. And then also start to really consider, what is the support that this program needs? It's so interesting that it can still be really hard for districts and schools to really build into their annual budget what support they need for technology. It's not a Chromebook purchase every 3 years. It's got to be sort of an annual investment. We always tell people like, no, don't think you can fundraise for tech once and be cool for 10 years. It's not going to work. So really helping that. We see there's still a lot of schools out there that don't use all their Title II funding. So make sure you're maxing that out to really get the education that your teachers need to support them. And then consider bringing in a partner for EdTech. Identifying some topics, starting general, digital citizenship is at the top of our list. So we definitely recommend you integrate that. And then whether you're a Google school or tend to do more Apple, or maybe you have a mix of both depending on grade levels. Really starting to make sure people know the basics of that. You can't do super cool things with the iPad if you don't understand the basics. You might not feel comfortable attempting really neat things with the iPad if you don't know how Apple's School Manager works, or if you don't know how you can see your students' screens or force them into apps. So starting with the basics, even though they might not seem flashy, even though they might not seem fun, is actually what's going to provide the teachers with the foundation they need to feel empowered to try cool things. Then you can start to get specific. And what's interesting post-COVID is prior to COVID, schools didn't necessarily have a ton of apps that they had. Then COVID hit, distance learning happened, and suddenly it was like, I'm going to try 100 different things. So now it's almost like we gotta rein back a little bit and go, okay, which ones do we really need? Which ones have worked? And then start to evaluate new ones. But definitely evaluate what schools currently have is going to be an important switch as we hopefully do not go back into distance learning and continue to kind of move out of this pandemic. Sharing out success. I'm a huge fan of this. So really thinking about how can you share these things? And what's great with a lot of this ed tech stuff that you're doing with teachers that they implement in the classroom is the end product that students develop is shareable on technology platforms, and it's really cool. I constantly see parents that are amazed and excited by what their kids can do at school. It also helps dispel that myth of parents being like, oh, the iPad just babysits my kid, teachers don't do anything anymore. That's not the case at all. In fact, the iPad creates usually more classroom management issues. It's not a babysitter. Maybe like a VHS used to be a babysitter, but the iPad is not. So sharing these things out, a couple platforms that we like to promote: staff meetings. For those regular staff meetings, have it calendared throughout the year. Yep, first grade, you're going to demo, you're going to share in November, and second grade's going to share in December, or whatever that rhythm is, to really make sure people feel excited, like, hey, yeah, I'm going to do something really cool and I'm going to share it out. Make sure it's highlighted in school newsletters. As much as principals love to put like clip art and other random things in their newsletter, that doesn't really excite parents. But if you can include a video that the fourth graders made, or some really neat slideshow that a seventh grader did, or some other cool activity, parents get excited about that. They're going to read your newsletter more. They're going to be talking about what's happening in the classroom in a really positive way. And anytime we can sort of promote that positive discussion in the community around what kids are doing in school, it always benefits everyone. Make sure you promote it on the website. Depending on what your community looks like, sometimes private schools have a church or other foundation that's connected with them. We always say, like, push this information out to those sorts of people. You may have different education foundations in your community or things like that, or other places that regularly donate. Push these things out to them. They want to see, like, what are the kids doing in the classroom? It's neat to see a picture of 30 kids on iPads in a classroom. It's much cooler to see the end product that they've developed. And definitely for fundraisers, that ties back to the community. The more we see communities promote all the cool stuff they're doing, the more excitement teachers have for EdTech, and oftentimes it leads to more funding and donations to the school. That was just all for this year, although certainly a lot to tackle as we already are entering October tomorrow. But definitely we say that by the end of the calendar year, so by the end of December, starting in January, you should really be preparing for next year. You should be looking at this year, scaffolding it up. How can I take my plan one step further? The SAMR model is one that definitely can help with that scaffolding, starting with substitution and kind of moving forward. This year, the kids typed their 5-paragraph essay instead of handwriting it. And then how can we take that to the next level? That can help with some scaffolding, especially for staff that are sort of very much at that entry level. And then really start tech planning. So what does your technology look like? What are you going to have to work with next year? What's your network going to be able to hold? All those different pieces in that January, February timeframe. And then make sure your EdTech planning is really sort of locked in March and April. We like to make sure it's done before the craziness of May, June, the end of the school year. Lock that in April, May, and present it to your teachers before summer. This is one of those things, like a brand new language arts curriculum, that teachers should be really kind of thinking about and mulling over the summer. I was a teacher myself. I totally understand, like, school gets out and you don't want to think about school for a while, but then sometimes you do want to start thinking about those things that can be a little bit more creative or fun or exciting. And this kind of falls into that bucket. So make sure teachers leave for the summer understanding what's their technology plan next year, what are the goals they have, what are they going to be expected to do. Don't dump them on that. Don't dump that on them in August. They'll be overwhelmed. They won't want to hear it. So just kind of as we wrap up here, some tips for us. Like I said, start with those students, aim for 1 to 3 goals for every teacher, self-identified by those teachers, approved by someone like you, Frank, approved by principals and things like that. Having a bank of 10 to 20 goals that are suggested for them to pick from and inspire them can be helpful. Make sure you have support for them. There's nothing worse than telling teachers like, you better do these 3 technology things. Here's Google, good luck, figure it out. It should be, here are the 5, 10 different resources that you have. Here's a partner that we're working with. Here's people at the district. Here's 1 or 2 teachers at your school that have been identified as people that can help. Here's some websites that you can look at. Here's some webinars. So really make sure they have a big plethora to pick from. Encourage that lesson enhancement. I mentioned this earlier and I saw you shaking your head. Yes, you know, there are teachers that have been teaching incredible math, history, language arts lessons for years. They don't have to throw those away. They can enhance them. So really help teachers know, like, this doesn't mean start over. This doesn't mean forget everything you did that was amazing. This means pick 1 project, pick 2 projects, pick 4 projects, 1 per grading period that we can really enhance with technology, especially for those teachers that are feeling really fearful. And then I can't say it enough, share, celebrate, really acknowledge those successes as much as you possibly can. Like Ryan said at the very beginning, you know, we do this for a variety of different schools. We'd love to kind of continue a discussion with you, help in any way. So would our team. This is my information and Ryan's information.